20 experts failed, but a young janitor fixed the error in just 1 minute. She didn't ask for credit, didn't want to be seen. All she wanted was peace. But then the CEO uncovered more than just her secret. He found her heart. A story about a past left behind, an unexpected connection, and a love that began where the scars were deepest. If you love heartfelt, meaningful stories, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You won't want to miss how it ends. The Whitmore Corporation headquarters blazed with light late into the night, well past 10 p.m. On the 27th floor, the Strategic AI Operations Center was packed, tense, and oppressively silent. Across the massive central screen, red letters kept flashing. Error. Core system failure. Standing before it was Ethan Hale, the youngest CEO in the company's history, once hailed as the golden mind of tech. But tonight, he looked like a shipwrecked sailor in the middle of a storm. His neatly styled hair was disheveled, tie loose, eyes sunken with exhaustion. We've run every data integrity check, stress-tested the APIs, traced the source code line by line. There's nothing, one expert from Japan reported, holding a printed system diagram. Could it be an external virus? Something outside the internal network? Another asked. Ethan said nothing. He just stared into space, as if willing a miracle to happen. And just down the hallway, in a dimly lit corner, no one noticed. Lena stood with her mop. Rubber gloves on, company-issued mesh cap pulled over her tied-back hair. She looked calm, unbothered. But her eyes, they weren't janitor's eyes. They were sharp, focused, watching everything and analyzing. Lena had been working here for 3 weeks. No one at the company knew much about her beyond her name and the shift schedule. A new hire from an outsourced cleaning service. No reason for anyone to care. But Lena paid close attention to every control panel, every snippet of technical debate between the engineers. She memorized it all. In her mind, she was reconstructing the system architecture, like an old game she used to play back in college when she was a computer engineering student. One frustrated engineer slammed a binder on the table. This makes no sense. The logic layer is clean. The problem can't be in the physical tier. Lena smirked slightly. It's not impossible, she whispered to herself. You're just looking in the wrong place. No one heard her. Just then, Ethan turned and walked into the conference room, calling the executive board. His voice was tired but resolute. Give me 24 more hours. If it's not fixed by then, I'll take full responsibility. At the far end of the hallway, Lena wiped the last streak of water from the floor, then quietly pushed her cleaning cart toward the tech wing, where tonight, the fate of the entire company was about to change. The next morning, the 27th floor of Whitmore lit up early. The air felt dense, heavy with tension. Experts from around the world had gathered, most of them hailed as brilliant minds in AI, representing Japan, Germany, Israel, Switzerland, even MIT. Ethan sat at the head of the conference table, arms folded, eyes deep and tired. Though only 32, he had made countless life or death decisions. But this felt like the most critical one yet. The Lyra system, a multi-million-dollar AI project designed to analyze customer behavior, was the strategic heart of the company's next 5 years. If it failed to launch on schedule, Whitmore wouldn't just lose a contract, it would lose the market's trust. We've simulated the entire environment from scratch, reported an older engineer with silver hair. There's no sign of breach, no malware, but the core module still won't load. Could it be a resource conflict between navigation layers? Suggested a young French engineer. No, we already checked. Even the driver tier shows no error logs. Another one shook his head. Just then, a small hand gently placed a coffee cup on the table beside a Korean engineer who was scowling at his screen. He looked up, briefly startled, at the girl in a janitor's uniform. She gave him a polite nod. He nodded back, saying nothing. Lena said nothing. Calmly, she turned and walked into the hallway, revealing nothing of the fact that she had just scanned the entire control panel in 5 brief seconds, and spotted a detail no one had touched. The physical connection layer might have been mispartitioned in the system's configuration, causing the logic structure to fail right at the entry point. A basic error. So basic that no one even considered it. She paused in front of the elevator. She knew that if she spoke up, no one would believe her. Worse, she could be accused of breaching security. A janitor had no place at that table, much less offering technical advice. She looked up at the ceiling and exhaled quietly. I guess I'll have to wait until they give up. Just then, a sharp sound echoed from the conference room, a fist hitting the table. One of the senior engineers shouted, "I'm done. This isn't in the standard architecture. It might have been faulty from day one." Ethan said nothing, staring ahead in silence. The entire room fell still. One by one, 20 experts closed their laptops, sighed, and stood up. They had failed. Outside, Lena remained standing. She clenched her fists, eyes steady with resolve. She didn't want to push her way into a world built on titles and power. But if she didn't say something, the system would crash. And maybe Ethan would too. And she couldn't let that happen. The 27th floor had returned to its usual nighttime stillness. The experts had left, some out of frustration, others simply too exhausted after 18 hours of getting nowhere. Ethan was the last to exit the conference room. He stood alone in the server room, where the Lyra system sat silent, like a lifeless shell. The lights had dimmed to energy-saving mode. The wall clock read 11:47 p.m. Ethan lowered his head, rubbed his forehead, then slowly walked out. He didn't notice the door hadn't fully shut behind him. A few minutes later, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway. Lena. She wore her janitor's uniform, a small crossbody bag slung over one shoulder, a flashlight and cleaning cloth in hand. Her shift had officially ended at 10 p.m., but she hadn't gone home. No one asked her to stay late, but she often did, partly to avoid attention, partly because she was waiting. And tonight, the door she'd been waiting for had finally cracked open. She stepped quietly into the server room, her soft-soled shoes making no sound. The faint lighting cast long shadows over rows of sleeping machines. Lena didn't look at the screens. She looked at the drives and the ports. Her eyes scanned the blinking status LEDs, pausing on a small device tucked deep beneath the third rack, a secondary switch module, something only senior-level hardware engineers would even bother to check. Lena knelt down and opened the mini control panel. The diagnostics popped up, and just as she suspected, the default partitioning had been misassigned. Data wasn't reaching the analytics layer. It was being rerouted into a sandbox environment meant for testing. She took a deep breath and reached into her pocket, pulling out a small USB drive. It wasn't anything exotic, just a manual patch she had written over the past 2 nights, built from an old system schematic that had leaked a few years ago, back when she was still an intern at one of Whitmore's subsidiaries. 3 lines of code. 1, 2, 3. The blinking amber lights across the rack shifted, all turning to steady blue. The Lyra system began to reboot. The hum of the cooling fans steadied. The monitors flared to life, the logo appeared, then the main operating interface loaded. Flawless, as if there had never been an error. Lena stood up and stared at the center of the screen, where the message read, "Welcome System Online." She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just exhaled, quietly, but deeply. In that vast server room, it was just her, and the soft return of a system's heartbeat, like a personal soundtrack for a silent victory. She pulled out the USB, shut down the terminal, and walked out, before the access logs could register her presence. What she didn't know was that the server room's camera had captured everything. And Ethan, who had come back to retrieve the phone he left behind, was standing frozen behind the glass, having seen it all. Ethan stood behind the frosted glass, his heart pounding like he'd just witnessed a game-saving play. He couldn't quite name what he was feeling. Shock, confusion, or awe? In front of him, the young woman with neatly tied hair and a slender frame in a dark blue janitor's uniform had just resolved a system failure that 20 top-tier experts couldn't fix. No hesitation, no second guessing. She stepped in and worked like she'd known that system her entire life. Lena walked out of the server room, unaware that his eyes had followed her every step. Ethan remained still, frozen in place. It wasn't until she disappeared down the hallway that he snapped out of it and rushed back into the server room. The main screen now read, "Lyra operational, all systems normal." He immediately pulled up the system logs and checked the security entries. One access, timestamped 11:53 p.m. No user ID, only internal USB activity. Frowning, Ethan quickly switched to the security camera feed. And there it was, a short video clip. Lena bent over the circuit panel, eyes sharp, lips pressed into a line, her hands moving with the speed and precision of a seasoned engineer. No fumbling, no reference materials, no asking for help. She knew exactly what she was doing. Ethan leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. Years of leadership, countless resumes reviewed, endless interviews. Yet no one had ever left him feeling both stunned and deeply curious. Who was she? A janitor or a hidden genius? The next morning, Lena arrived early for her shift as usual. She mopped the floor of the 27th floor hallway, occasionally stealing a glance into the server room, now brightly lit and running smoothly. Ethan was already waiting in the conference room. As she pushed her cleaning cart past the open door, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Miss Lena, can you come in for a moment?" Lena froze. Her heart skipped. He knew. She recognized that look, the look of someone who had seen something they weren't supposed to. But she stepped in anyway. No fear, no deflection. Ethan studied her for a few seconds, then placed the USB on the table and slid it toward her. "You did this. Why?" Lena paused, then answered, soft but sure, "Because I knew I could." Ethan didn't smile, but in his eyes, something shifted, no longer suspicion, but the beginning of respect. Morning light poured through the tall glass panels of the 27th floor conference room, casting long shadows across the polished walnut table. Lena sat at one end, hands neatly folded in her lap. Her face was calm, but the caution in her eyes was unmistakable. After all, this was the first time she'd been called into a meeting by the CEO himself, and it had nothing to do with a mop. Ethan sat across from her, slowly turning the small USB drive between his fingers. No assistant, no secretary, no recording devices, just the two of them and a quiet truth resting between them. "You used to be in this field, didn't you?" Ethan said plainly. Lena gave a slight nod, not breaking eye contact. "I studied computer engineering, interned at a software company. And after that," she gave a faint smile, half wry, half resigned. "After that, I chose to become a janitor." Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. A lesser man might have laughed, or looked skeptical. But not him. There was no condescension in his eyes, only curiosity. Deep curiosity. "I once told my friends," Lena continued, her voice even, like she was telling someone else's story, "that if I ever walked away from tech, it wouldn't be because I wasn't good enough, but because I needed room to breathe. No one believed me. But in the end, I believed myself first." Ethan watched her, long enough for the silence to settle into something heavier. "You know," he said finally, "I used to think I was the only one here who didn't care about resumes. I once hired an intern without a degree. He's now head of R&D. But you," he smiled slightly, shaking his head, "you confuse me." "Because I don't have credentials?" Lena asked. "Or because I fixed something 20 experts couldn't?" "Because of both." Lena stood up, smoothing the cloth tucked into her pocket. "If you want to call security or fire me for unauthorized access, I understand." Ethan raised a hand, stopping her. "No, I want you to stay, but not to clean floors." She looked up at him, eyes widening. "Technical assistant. Temporary for now. I need someone with your instincts, and I want to understand you better." Lena pressed her lips together. Part of her wanted to say yes, but another part held back, cautious. She hadn't come to this company to stand out. She came to observe, to stay hidden. But the look in his eyes now wasn't that of a CEO hunting for talent. It was something else. Like a man who'd just stumbled upon something rare and didn't want to lose it. And for the first time in months, Lena felt her heart skip a beat. The first week, as a temporary technical assistant, passed like a strange breeze for both of them. Lena was issued a new access badge, a new desk, right outside the CEO's office. She no longer wore a janitor's uniform. Now it was a crisp white blouse and tailored slacks, neat in a way that felt unfamiliar even to herself. Senior staff started whispering. No one knew exactly who she was, only that she used to mop floors, and now the CEO had personally placed her in the tech division. For Lena, being surrounded by system blueprints, data simulations, and network diagrams felt like returning home. But this time, she wasn't there for the paycheck or prestige. She was there to observe Ethan, the brilliant, unpredictable man who kept surprising her. They worked closely, often sparring over ideas. Ethan was quick, sharp, and demanding, but Lena held her own. She had something no one else in the tech team had: intuition. Without lengthy calculations, she could glance at a processing flowchart and spot the bottleneck in 30 seconds. "You've got a brain that reads machine language like it's poetry," Ethan murmured one afternoon as they hovered over a model of their predictive AI system. "It's like you built it." Lena gave a faint smile, but didn't respond. Her eyes shifted away, and he noticed it. There was something she wasn't saying, not about her intelligence, but about her past. One time, when the two of them went down to the cafeteria for lunch, Ethan's first time there since becoming CEO, a longtime employee accidentally dropped a tray of drinks. Ethan instinctively stepped back, but Lena moved faster. She caught a falling glass in one hand, steady and calm. Then she froze for a beat when the employee gasped. "Lena? You used to work at Albrecht Labs, didn't you?" The air thickened. Lena simply smiled. "I get mistaken a lot," she said, then turned away. But Ethan caught it. Albrecht Labs, not a small name, and definitely not a forgotten one in the high-tech world. That night, alone in his office, Ethan opened his laptop and typed a few words. Lena, Albrecht. No solid results, but one faint thread surfaced, an old forum post, just a few speculative lines. The chairman of Albrecht was rumored to have an illegitimate daughter with an internal engineer. The child disappeared after the mother died of illness, never acknowledged by the father. Ethan paused. No names, no photos, but one line stood out. They say the girl had deep gray eyes, like a winter lake. He closed his eyes. Lena's eyes flashed in his mind. This morning, calm and steady as she fixed a system 20 engineers couldn't crack without even checking the documentation. He picked up his phone, replayed the security footage from the night the system came back online. There she was, bending over the control board. The light hit her face at an angle. Those gray eyes, unmistakable. Ethan leaned back, heart tangled. If Lena was truly the unacknowledged daughter of Albrecht's chairman, his company's biggest partner, and she had chosen not to claim him, then her presence at Whitmore wasn't just chance. But what unsettled Ethan more than anything was the look in Lena's eyes. Not calculated, not manipulative, just quiet, like someone who didn't want to be found. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain. Ethan wanted to protect her. He slowly closed the laptop and stared out at the night through his office windows. The wind pushed wisps of clouds across the moon, blurry and shifting, just like his thoughts. She refused her father. And he, right then, knew he was stepping into something bigger than any AI system, a story of bloodlines denied, and a trust that still waited to be earned. The partnership gala between Whitmore and Albrecht Group was held at a 5-star hotel in the heart of the city, where crystal chandeliers glowed above and expensive French wine sparkled in delicate glasses. Ethan arrived right on time, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, walking confidently among the industry's top figures, yet his mind was elsewhere. At a quiet, empty table in the far corner. Lena wasn't there. He had invited her personally, not through a secretary, but with a simple, direct offer. "It's just a party. You don't have to say anything. Just be there." She had looked at him for a long second, then quietly said, "You don't understand. That place isn't made for someone like me. Then I'll make it your place." But she didn't come. The night unfolded with speeches, toasts, and camera flashes. But as Ethan stepped down from the podium, a hand rested on his shoulder. Chairman Friedrich Albrecht. "Step outside with me," the older man said. Not a request, a command. They stood on the balcony overlooking the city from the 48th floor. In the distance, the Whitmore building gleamed under the night sky. "You know, Ethan," Albrecht began, his voice deep and deliberate, "I have everything, money, power, influence. But what I don't have is a daughter." Ethan said nothing. That wasn't small talk. "She's working at your company," Albrecht continued, eyes drifting toward the wine glass in his hand. "Her name is Lena. Her mother was a brilliant engineer, but never recognized. She hid the pregnancy, raised the child alone. When she passed, the girl vanished from my world too." He turned to Ethan. "Now I only want one thing, for her to call me father, just once." Ethan frowned. "I don't think she wants that." "And I'm not forcing her," Albrecht replied calmly. "But I know she trusts you, and I also know Whitmore needs a long-term partner if it's going to enter the European market." Silence. "Let's call it a condition," he said firmly. "Not written in a contract, but in the heart." Ethan tightened his grip on the glass. He'd never imagined that his first major strategic partnership after 3 relentless years building his empire would come with a clause so personal. Albrecht set his glass down on the balcony table, his gaze softening for the first time that evening. "I don't need shares. I don't need control. I just need my child to look back at me and see a father. Then he walked away, leaving Ethan alone in the night wind, with a mission he'd never been trained for, to reach the heart of someone who had chosen to live without needing anyone. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual. He stood before the tall glass window, watching the rush of traffic below, but his mind replayed the words from the night before. I just need my child to look back at me like a father. He had no idea where to begin. Convincing Lena wasn't like closing a business deal. She lived quietly, carrying a kind of solitude no one could touch. Every word, every gesture seemed wrapped in something invisible. Not to conceal, but to protect herself from the world. At exactly 8 a.m., Lena walked in, same white shirt, hair neatly tied back, eyes clear but distant. She placed a technical report on his desk and turned to leave, as always. Lena, Ethan said, softly. But it was enough to make her pause. Can you sit for a moment? It's not work-related. She looked at him for a few seconds, then slowly pulled out a chair and sat, silent, as if she already knew what was coming. I spoke with Chairman Albrecht last night, Ethan began. He noticed her shoulders tighten slightly, though her expression didn't change. He knows you're here, and he wants. I don't care, Lena cut in. Her voice for once was sharp. We don't need to talk about that. Ethan paused. He wasn't surprised, but the firmness in her voice landed heavy in his chest. He's not my father, she continued, eyes fixed on the window. He's just the guy who gave me half my DNA. I grew up without him. I lost my mom, alone. If he really wanted to be a father, he would have come a long time ago. Not now, just because I've crossed into his line of sight. Ethan said nothing. He understood. He couldn't defend a man who'd been absent from nearly every chapter of his daughter's life. But silence wasn't enough either. Maybe he did fail, Ethan said softly. Maybe he doesn't deserve it, but forgiveness, it's not for him, it's for you. She turned to him. It was the first time Ethan used the word you with that softness, and for the first time, something cracked, ever so slightly, in Lena's eyes. He went on. You're always trying to be strong, but you don't have to carry the whole world on your back. Being alone isn't always the right kind of choice. Lena stood. No anger, no argument. She just said quietly, you don't understand. You're from that world where handshakes and contracts matter more than feelings. Ethan stood too, closing the space between them. No, I'm just someone trying to learn how to step into yours. Their eyes met, and the silence between them felt full. When Lena left the room, she didn't shut the door completely. It remained slightly ajar, as if something inside her had just begun to open. A few days had passed since that conversation. Lena no longer avoided Ethan, but she didn't open up either. She still worked beside him, still offered sharp insights, still smiled now and then. But her eyes still kept a distance. Ethan understood. So he didn't push. He didn't bring up her father again, didn't repeat the offer. Instead, he chose to tell a story. His own. That day, the office was quiet. Rain poured down outside in heavy sheets, wind tapping steadily against the glass. Lena was reorganizing a new algorithm model when Ethan walked in, holding 2 takeout boxes from the cafeteria. He set one down on her desk. Chicken curry. Not terrible, he said with a soft smile. Lena was about to refuse. But then she sat down. She opened the box. A warm, familiar aroma filled the space between them on that rainy afternoon. On days like this, Ethan began slowly. I always remember one thing, family dinner. Lena looked up, a little surprised. Ethan had never shared anything personal. He was always the polished CEO, the firm leader, never letting down his guard. But I didn't have a family, he continued, eyes drifting to the rain outside. I grew up in an orphanage in Idaho. I was 14 the first time I ever had a meal with someone sitting across from me. Lena froze. Every Christmas, he said quietly, kids like me had to wrap presents for ourselves. One year, they forgot. We laughed like it was nothing. But that night, I cried until morning. He turned to her, his gaze not pitiful, just honest. I thought I was strong because I got through it. But even now, I still long for just one dinner where someone asks me, how was your day? Lena said nothing. She had never imagined that the man at the top of a tech empire, respected by an entire industry, could carry such a simple human yearning. Something cracked open quietly inside her, not from pity, but from understanding. She had grown up with her own kind of emptiness. Unlike Ethan, she had a mother. But her mother had held everything together for too long, until she quietly passed away in a rented room with no one there to say goodbye. Lena had never told anyone that every night she would place her hand on her chest just to remember the rhythm of her mother's breath. Now, for the first time, she didn't feel like the only one carrying lonely memories. She looked up, her voice soft. "Was the food in the orphanage any good?" Ethan smiled. "Not as good as today. Today someone's eating with me." For the first time, Lena truly laughed, and that laugh softened the whole rainy day. In that moment, between them, no confessions, no hands held, just something real, quietly beginning. That afternoon, Lena stood silently in front of the grand lobby of the Albrecht Grand Hotel, where Chairman Friedrich Albrecht was staying during his extended business trip. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, heart beating faster than usual. She wasn't sure if this was the right thing to do or what she would even say. She only knew she was ready. Beside her, Ethan gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "If you don't want to go in, I won't push, but I'll wait for as long as it takes." Lena looked up at him, her gaze unexpectedly calm. "I'm not going in for him. I'm going in for me." She stepped into the lobby. Ethan didn't follow. He stayed outside, watching her like a small bird taking flight, bravely crossing the boundary of a pain that had been buried for far too long. The door to the high-floor suite opened. Friedrich Albrecht sat in a chair, no longer the image of a powerful chairman, just an aging man, his eyes heavy with regret. Lena stood before him, no bowed head, no tears, just a quiet voice. "I didn't come here to forgive you, and I didn't come to be your daughter." Her tone was steady. "I came to say, I'm okay. My mother raised me well, and I don't hate you anymore. I don't need you to make anything right." Friedrich gave a trembling nod, his wrinkled hand resting over his chest like he was holding a heart that had just grown a little lighter. He said nothing but one line, "Thank you for coming." That was all. Lena left the room, not feeling weightless but no longer burdened. She didn't cry. She didn't rush into his arms, but she knew, just by showing up, the past had already begun to shift. She walked back to the lobby. Ethan was still there, hands in his pockets, tall frame glowing softly under the golden light spilling in through the glass. "I knew you could do it," he said softly as she walked up. Lena smiled, not a sarcastic smirk, not a polite curl of the lips. A real smile, light like the moment you realize you're no longer alone. "And I know," she replied, "that if it weren't for you, I might have never looked back." Ethan was quiet for a beat, then tilted his head, voice low and steady. "So what if we started over, from the beginning?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to date the CEO?" No," Ethan chuckled. "I'm asking if you'll be the person I cook dinner with every night." Lena laughed. "Only if you learn how to make rice that doesn't burn." "I'll learn, if someone's willing to taste the first try." This time, she didn't answer. She simply stepped forward and took his hand, naturally, without explanation. And in the middle of a city full of passing strangers, in a world of meetings and mergers, two people who had once carried their solitude like armor found something they hadn't dared to believe was real. A place to lean, a hand that wouldn't let go, a love built on understanding. 3 years later. On an early summer afternoon, smoke billowed once again from the kitchen of Ethan Whitmore's penthouse apartment. As usual, it was followed by coughing, the loud whir of a fan, and Lena's uncontainable laughter. "You might be the best CEO in the city, but starting today, you are officially banned from touching the rice cooker," Lena declared, flipping off the power switch and tapping a spoon gently on Ethan's forehead. "That's a signature style. Crispy rice is good for your health?" Ethan muttered in weak protest, still holding the slightly charred wooden ladle. Lena walked over to open the window, letting the breeze carry out the smell of burnt rice. The afternoon sunlight fell across her face, still graceful, but now peaceful in a way it hadn't been before. Gone was the guarded edge, the look of someone used to being hurt. In her eyes now was a Lena who had opened up, who had loved, and who had forgiven even the oldest scars in her memory. On the dining table was a dish of caramelized pork, the one recipe Ethan had mastered from a cooking video. Lena took a bite, then nodded with mock seriousness. "Better than last week. Not as salty as your first deal with Albrecht." Ethan sat across from her, poured tea, and said softly, Chairman Albrecht called this morning. They want to name a new research lab after you. The Lena Initiative, a scholarship fund for underprivileged engineering students. Lena looked up, surprised. I never asked for that. He knows, but he said, I missed my chance to be her father. Now I just want to help her finish her dream. Lena didn't respond. She simply picked up her tea and took a slow sip. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was warm. Then Ethan stood, stepped into the bedroom, and returned with a small box. He placed it gently in front of her, then opened it. Inside was a simple platinum ring, no diamond, just a small engraved line of text. You're not alone anymore. Lena looked at him, her eyes uncertain. You don't have to answer right now, Ethan said softly. I just want you to know, no matter what shape your past takes, my present looks like you. Lena was silent for a few seconds, then smiled. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. She simply reached out, took the ring, and slipped it on, as if it had been waiting there all along. Outside the window, the sun had set. But in that little kitchen, where burnt rice had once made them both laugh, love continued to simmer, quietly, steadily, and without spectacle, because in the end, they had found each other. In a vast world, they had become each other's home. Not perfect, just a warm meal, unburned.